We've got other royal rifts, of course. But this doesn't just put her at, a distance from her parents, but also it's going to affect her relationship with her sister, because we understand Princess Beatrice is taking a different approach, not stepping back from her parents.
There are moments in a person's life when silence becomes impossible to sustain. Not because the world is demanding answers and not because the pressure from outside has finally broken through, but because something shifts internally. Some quiet threshold is crossed, and the weight of everything unsaid becomes heavier than the fear of saying it. Princess Beatrice of York has spent the better part of her adult life on the wrong side of that threshold. She has watched, she has waited, she has smiled through Christmas walkabouts and public engagements while carrying something that most people will never fully understand, the knowledge of who her father really is, and the love for him that has survived that knowledge anyway. She is 37 years old. She has 2 daughters of her own now. She has built a professional life in technology and climate finance that stands entirely on its own merit, completely independent of her royal title or her family name. She has a stable marriage, a growing list of charitable patronages, and a public presence that communicates composure and purpose every single time she steps in front of a camera. By almost any external measure, she is thriving. And yet the story that defines her life, the one she has never told, the one she has never been able to escape, is not her story at all. It belongs to her father. And in ways that are only now becoming fully visible, it is costing her more than anyone outside the family has truly understood. To understand where Princess Beatrice stands today, you have to understand what the name she was born into once meant and what it means now. Prince Andrew was not always the figure the world recognizes in 2025. Long before the scandals, the controversies, and the catastrophic public implosion, he was something that the British public genuinely admired. In 1982, he flew combat missions in the Falklands War at the age of 22. He performed helicopter casualty evacuations under enemy fire. He acted as a missile decoy, positioning his aircraft between Argentine Exocets and the ships of the Royal Navy Fleet. When the Atlantic conveyor was struck and 26 sailors needed rescue, he was part of the crew that pulled them from the water. He came home a hero in the most literal sense of that word, and the nation celebrated him as one. Princess Beatrice was born 6 years after that war ended. She arrived into a family where her father's valor was not a distant memory, but a living, documented fact, witnessed by the men he had served alongside, recorded in his squadron commander's official reports, and embedded into the national consciousness. The version of Andrew that Beatrice grew up believing in was not a fantasy. It was real. It had weight. It had proof. That matters enormously because it explains something fundamental about why she has stood by him through everything that followed. She was not defending a fiction. She was defending the man she had known since childhood, the man who had actually existed, even as that man steadily disappeared beneath the wreckage of his own choices. What she could not have known in those early years was the other version of her father that existed in parallel, the one documented by royal biographers, foreign diplomats, and palace staff who watched him operate behind closed doors. The pettiness, the extraordinary demands, the behavior that earned him the nickname, His Buffoon Highness, among British diplomatic circles. The trade envoy years from 2001 to 2011 that left a trail of questions across Kazakhstan, Libya, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, and beyond. The financial transactions that professional surveyors described as inexplicable. The associations with figures whose backgrounds, when fully examined, raise questions that nobody in the family was ever going to ask out loud. Beatrice grew up watching 2 versions of the same man, and for a long time, she chose the version she had always known. There is one moment in this entire story that defines Beatrice's relationship with her father more precisely than any other, and it is a moment that has been reported but never fully reckoned with in terms of what it actually reveals about her. In November 2019, the BBC's Newsnight program had spent months attempting to secure an interview with Prince Andrew. The palace had resisted. Negotiations had stalled repeatedly. And then, 3 days before filming was scheduled to begin, something unexpected happened. Princess Beatrice arrived at the pre-interview discussions. Nobody had invited her. Nobody had put her name on the access list. She came because she wanted to be there for her father, and because she genuinely believed, with the conviction of someone who loved him deeply, that giving him the chance to speak directly to the British public was the right thing to do. Producer Sam McAllister, who had worked for months to make that interview happen, later described Beatrice in her published account as the decisive presence in the room. She was polite, warm, and composed, but she was also the person who had her father's interests at heart more completely than anyone else present. Royal expert Helena Chard described her as the individual who created the atmosphere that allowed Andrew to feel safe enough to proceed. Beatrice did not merely support the interview. She was the reason it happened. She reassured her father. She helped create the conditions under which he sat down. On November 16, 2019, Prince Andrew delivered what communications professionals across the industry would subsequently describe as one of the most damaging television appearances by a public figure in the history of British broadcasting. Within 24 hours, he had withdrawn from all public duties. Within 2 years, he had lost his military titles and royal patronages. Within 6 years, he had been stripped of every title, honor, and official residence the crown had ever granted him. Beatrice has never spoken publicly about what she felt when she watched that interview air. She has never acknowledged her role. She has never said whether she carries any weight of personal responsibility for what followed. But the documented record is not ambiguous. The daughter who loved her father most was the same daughter who walked into a room uninvited, helped him feel ready, and handed him the platform that completed his destruction. That is not something a person processes quickly. That is something a person carries. If you want to understand how Beatrice has been living with the consequences of her father's conduct, you do not need to read her statements because she has not made any. You need to look at her wedding photographs. Or more precisely, you need to notice the absence in them. Beatrice married Edoardo Mapelli-Mazzi on July 17, 2020, in a ceremony at the Royal Chapel of All Saints at Royal Lodge in Windsor. The guest list was approximately 20 people. There were no official photographs released to the press. The coverage was minimal, almost invisible by the standards of what a royal wedding of this significance would normally generate. The original plan had been completely different. The couple had been due to marry at the Chapel Royal in St. James's Palace in May 2020, with a reception at Buckingham Palace and a guest list of over 100 guests. It was going to be a full, formal royal celebration. The COVID-19 pandemic provided a partial explanation for the change. But palace sources confirmed to multiple royal correspondents at the time that Andrew's accelerating scandal was an equally significant factor. The palace had reached the conclusion that any high-profile ceremony with official photographs and extensive media coverage would inevitably become a story about Andrew's disgrace rather than his daughter's happiness. The only way to give Beatrice a wedding day she could cherish was to make it small enough that it could not be used against her. Andrew walked his daughter down the aisle. He gave a speech. He was present for every moment that a father would want to be present for. And then he was removed from every official photograph that was released. Royal editor Camilla Tominey captured it precisely. There was a sense that Andrew, and by association his former wife Sarah Ferguson, had to be erased. That erasure was not done to him by hostile outsiders. It was chosen by Beatrice's own team for Beatrice's own protection. On the happiest day of her life, her father had become someone who could not be shown to the world standing beside her. She made that choice. She lived with it. She has never said a word about it. On October 30th, 2025, King Charles made a decision that had no precedent in over a century of British royal history. In a single morning, he stripped his own brother of everything. The Duke of York title was formally removed. The rank of prince was gone. The Knight of the Garter, one of the oldest and most prestigious honors in the entire British monarchy, was revoked. The official notice to vacate Royal Lodge, the Windsor property where Andrew had lived for more than 2 decades, was served the same day. Andrew went from being a prince of the United Kingdom to being a private citizen with a criminal investigation still attached to his name, and he experienced that transformation between breakfast and lunch. Somewhere in London, a 37-year-old woman who had spent years quietly, invisibly, trying to manage and absorb and protect against the damage her father was doing watched it all happen in real time. Footage emerged the same day of Beatrice and her younger sister Eugenie in what appeared to be an urgent and private conversation. A lip-reading expert analyzed the footage and reported what she believed the sisters were communicating to each other. Beatrice reportedly told Eugenie that they were in it together, that it was going to get harder, and that there was nothing they could do. She told her sister that Eugenie needed to be out of the country because their father was not going to play by the rules and they needed to be out of the blast radius. Eugenie reportedly responded that everything was changing. Those are not the words of a daughter who has abandoned her father. They are the words of a daughter who has fully accepted the reality of who her father is and what he is capable of, and who is trying to protect her sister and herself from what is still to come, while refusing to completely sever the tie that has always defined her. In the months after Andrew's formal detitling, Beatrice did something that surprised a number of people who expected her to quietly increase her distance from him. She kept showing up. In January 2026, she was photographed horseback riding with Andrew in Home Park at Windsor Castle. Her 4-year-old daughter Sienna rode alongside them. This was not an accidental encounter caught by a telephoto lens from a distance. This was a 45-minute outing in a location where photographers are present regularly, which means that everyone involved understood the images were going to be seen. A source close to the family confirmed that she had not cut off contact, that she had seen him multiple times, and had been consistently supportive. When Beatrice's second daughter, Athena, was christened in December 2025, Andrew attended the ceremony. He was kept out of the official photographs, following the pattern that had become standard. But he was there as a grandfather for one of the most significant moments in his daughter's life, even as everything attached to his own name continued to unravel around him. Former BBC royal correspondent Jenny Bond described Beatrice's position with a clarity that is difficult to improve upon. Being photographed with Andrew had become a reputational risk, not because Beatrice was doing anything morally wrong, but because in a media environment where every image carries meaning independently of intent, association has consequences that no amount of good judgment can fully prevent. Bond noted that Beatrice, as the elder daughter, almost certainly feels a heightened sense of responsibility for her parents' well-being, and that watching both of them humiliated, isolated, and increasingly marginalized must be extraordinarily painful in a way that the public cannot fully access. Beatrice has said nothing. Not a single public word about her father's conduct, his losses, his investigations, or the cost to her own life of everything that has happened. Royal analysts have noted this silence with a kind of careful admiration mixed with genuine concern, because the silence itself communicates something important. Is not the silence of someone who does not care. Is not the silence of someone who has made her peace with everything and moved on. Body language analysts who have studied her public appearances throughout this entire period have consistently noted signs of extraordinary emotional control, what one described as deliberately performed composure, resilience maintained through visible effort at moments when a less disciplined person would have visibly broken. At the Christmas 2025 walkabout at Sandringham, the first major royal public engagement after Andrew's detitling, one body language expert noted that Beatrice's smile looked performed in a way that communicated not happiness but endurance. In footage from the day the titles were formally stripped, the same expert observed that she looked tense and haunted, with an expression that was strikingly inconsistent with the wide-eyed warmth she normally projects in public. She is holding it together. The question is what it is costing her to do so, and how long she can sustain it. The full complexity of Beatrice's situation is not visible if you only look at what her father has done. You also have to look at what she has built for herself completely independently, while all of this was happening around her. She works in technology and climate finance. She speaks at the World Economic Forum in Davos on economic policy and sustainability. She runs her own company, Purpose Economy Intelligence Limited. She has been a committed patron of the Helen Arkell Dyslexia Charity since she was diagnosed with dyslexia herself as a child, and she has spoken about that cause with a personal authenticity that is clearly not performative. In the past year, she has taken on 3 additional charitable patronages, including the Outward Bound Trust, which was previously held by her father before his titles were removed. She has effectively stepped into the space her father vacated,